You're listening to Elite Leader Insights, where we turn insight into action.
Each week, we unpack one powerful leadership truth to help you build trust, lead with clarity, and influence with purpose, all drawn from the Elite Leader Insights newsletter by Donald C. Kunkel Jr.
He's the founder of the Elite Leadership Center, author of The Foundations of Influence, and creator of the TECCA Influence System, a full-spectrum leadership assessment and coaching tool for real growth.
If you're ready to lead with clarity, build trust, and influence with purpose, you're in the right place.
So today we're diving into something that honestly probably affects almost everyone at some point, even really successful leaders. It's that tendency to compare ourselves. You know, that feeling you look sideways at what someone else is doing, their progress, and you just get that little nagging thought, shouldn't I be, further along by now?
It's incredibly common. Theodore Roosevelt had that great quote, right? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Exactly. But for leaders, it feels like it can steal more than just joy. It can really hijack your momentum, your focus, even your impact.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
And what's really key to understand up front is this isn't some, personal failing or character flaw. It's actually how our brains work.
Okay.
Yeah, there's this whole field. Social comparison theory, Leon Festinger talked about it way back, and it's still backed up today. It basically says we figure out how we're doing by looking at others.
Yeah.
Especially when things feel uncertain.
So it's a natural sense-making thing.
Precisely. We compare upwards, looking at people who seem ahead, and downwards, looking at those maybe not as far along. Both happen.
But it sounds like for leaders, for people really trying to grow, that upward comparison is where the trouble starts.
That's usually the case, yeah. Especially for high achievers. Looking up can trigger all sorts of unhelpful stuff, feelings of inadequacy. You mentioned imposter syndrome.
Right.
And just this constant, kind of exhausting self-checking. Am I good enough? Am I keeping up?
And here's where it gets really interesting for leadership, I think. These internal doubts, they don't just stay internal, do they? They start to shift how you actually behave as a leader.
Exactly. That's the critical link. It's not just a feeling. It becomes an action. Leaders caught in that comparison cycle, they can start drifting away from their own solid principles.
How so? Like what?
Well, they might start chasing performance over purpose, maybe copying strategies that worked for someone else but aren't really right for them or their team.
Okay. Misaligned strategies.
Yeah, or abandoning a perfectly good decision they made because a competitor did something splashy, Suddenly, it's more about being seen to be successful than actually being effective in their own way.
So prioritizing perception over substance.
You got it. And the real cost. You start losing connection. Your team can often sense when something's off, when you're not leading authentically. And maybe even worse, you lose connection with your own leadership identity. You're leading from should not is.
Wow. That sounds like it creates a lot of internal friction. And I imagine that friction has real-world costs, operationally speaking.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about feeling stressed, though that's part of it. When you're constantly leading in a way that goes against your grain, against your natural strengths and values, that incongruence, it's draining.
Right.
Burnout is a big one. Emotional exhaustion. But also inconsistent performance because you're forcing a style that just isn't you, and crucially, a loss of trust. People sense inauthenticity, and you even start doubting yourself.
Is there research that kind of backs this up?
Yeah, definitely. There's something called trait activation theory. Basically, it says we do our best work when our situation lets us use our core traits. When leaders feel forced to act against their natural style, like research from Springerlink showed they report way more fatigue, less satisfaction, and find it harder to connect.
That makes total sense.
And another angle, self-determination theory, points out that when your sense of autonomy and personal alignment gets messed up by this comparison pressure, your resilience drops. Your influence actually weakens.
So it's not just feeling bad, it's actively making you less effective.
That's the bottom line. When you lead in a way that contradicts who you are, the cost isn't just personal discomfort. It's diminished impact. Period.
That's powerful. And it resonates because, our source for this conversation, Donald Kunkel Jr., he shared a bit about his own experience with this. He talked about questioning his own style, which he describes as more relationship-driven, reflective, adaptive, wondering if it was, leaderly enough. Did he need to be more, forceful or something?
And that's such a relatable struggle. But what he found, and what's so important here, is that lasting impact rarely comes from trying to fit some external mold.
It's about congruence.
Yeah, exactly. Real influence stems from that deep alignment between who you are your values, your strengths, and how you actually lead day to day, not from putting on a show. That's where trust really builds.
Okay, so let's make this really practical. For you listening, if you recognize yourself in this, if you feel caught in that comparison spiral, what can you actually do? Don's work offers some really concrete shifts.
Yeah, let's break those down.
First one, use self-referenced metrics. Shift the questions you ask yourself. So instead of, am I where they are, or are my results as good as X, try asking, okay, have I made meaningful progress in the last quarter? Or am I moving forward on my priorities?
Right. It's about measuring against your past self, not against someone else's present. Research actually shows this approach. Focusing on internal progress builds stronger motivation. More self-confidence, too. It's your race, your track.
I like that. Okay, second shift. Transform comparison into curiosity.
This is a great reframe.
Yeah.
So when you feel that little pang of envy or inadequacy, looking at someone else's success, pause. Don't just push it away or let it fester.
Get curious instead.
Exactly. Ask yourself, okay, what specifically about their success caught my eye? Was it their consistency, their boldness, a specific skill?
So dissect it a bit.
Yeah. Use it as data for your own growth. If you admire their consistency, maybe you ask, how can I build more consistency? If it's boldness, where could I be a little bolder? It turns a potential distraction into a learning opportunity.
Learn from them. Don't try to be them.
That's it precisely.
Okay, and the third one, set identity-based goals. This feels different from typical goal setting.
It is, and it's powerful. Many of us set outcome goals, right?
Yeah.
It's achieve X revenue, get Y promotion. Those are fine, but they're external.
And they can change or feel out of reach sometimes.
Right. An identity-based goal is about the kind of leader you want to be. Like, I will lead with integrity and empathy, or I am a leader who empowers my team.
So it's about character, not just results.
Exactly. And those kinds of goals, they stick with you through ups and downs. They guide your daily actions regardless of what the external scoreboard says. It anchors your growth in something much deeper and more stable.
This is so important because, like we touched on, comparison can easily slip into something less healthy, right? Like actual, maybe unspoken competition.
Absolutely. That's the danger zone. When you start seeing peers purely as rivals, when your focus shifts from your own growth to just trying to, outpace someone else, seeking validation instead of building real value.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And research calls this a performance orientation. Studies link it pretty clearly to more anxiety, less innovation because you're afraid to fail, and, surprise, surprise, burnout.
So what's the healthier alternative?
It's called a mastery orientation. That's where your focus is on learning, developing your skills, becoming better than you were before. It's about personal growth.
Competing with yourself, essentially.
Yes. And that approach builds real resilience, adaptability, and ultimately much greater long-term effectiveness and satisfaction. It's a sustainable path.
It really circles back to that quote from Don you mentioned earlier about holding your draft against someone else's highlight reel.
It's such a perfect visual.
You're not behind, you're not failing, you're just holding your in-progress draft against someone else's highlight reel. That external scoreboard, it just doesn't know your story, your values, your context. It can't define you.
Exactly. And when you really internalize that, when you reset your own internal metrics, anchoring them in your purpose and who you genuinely are, in steady growth, something shifts. You don't just find momentum again. You find your voice.
You regain your authentic power.
Yeah. And in leadership, ultimately, that's everything. That's what truly matters.
So the big takeaway here seems to be shift your focus.
Yeah.
Move away from those external comparisons and anchor yourself in internal growth, your own identity, and use curiosity, not envy, as your guide.
Leadership is a daily decision. If this episode sparked something in you, lean into it.
You can get your TECCA Power Profile at EliteLeadershipCenter.com. It takes 5 minutes and could reshape how you lead.
And if you enjoyed today's insight, pass it on.
Thank you for joining us for our latest Elite Leaders Insights podcast.
Until next week, remember, leadership is influence in action every day, in every relationship. Let's build it together.